My name is Paolo Anedda. I'm an electronic engineer, and I spend half of my career in the research and the other half in the industry as a software developer. And now I'm in charge of the cloud application development at Inpeco. So I organized this presentation in three different parts. The first one is about clinical process automation and traceability. I want to talk you a little about the history of Inpeco, and everything started inside a laboratory in San Raffaele Hospital in Milan, where Gianandrea Pedrazzini, who is the founder of the Inpeco, with a couple of graduates from the Polytechnic of Milano, started to work at the lab automation prototype. At that time, they worked to mechanize and automate all the tasks related to the preparation of samples that has to be processed. But their goal was to concentrate on the not on the clinical part, but on the process itself. And because they realized that the process actually the manual process is where most of the errors happen. And so in few years, they succeed to realize the first prototype. They presented, and from then it was an history of 30 years of successes. And today we are recognized as the world. I can say without doubt that we are the world leader in the development and deployment of automation system for the clinical lab. And our product allows to avoid all human intervention inside the lab, apart from monitoring or, of course, the reporting and the results. So with our product, the lab manager are able to increase their productivity and increase the efficiency, the speed, and of course reduce the errors. We are always obsessed by the reduction of errors in the lab. So every development activity is driven by the idea of eliminating the errors by using a combination of automation and traceability. This allows us to deliver a complete chain of custody for the samples. And this is very important for the quality of the results, let me say the outcome of the clinical lab activity. And one of the key aspects of the success of our products is the open design of our main product, which is, by the way, is called FlexLab. That means that our customer can buy the analyzer they prefer, or even they can reuse the analyzer let me say the legacy analyzers they already have inside the lab. After securing the process inside the lab, then we look at what's happening outside, and in particular in what's so-called the pre-analytical phase of the clinical lab process. And so we developed our second product, which is called, by the way, ProTube, which is a very complex system. I mean, it looks simple, but it's complex because it allows to automate and trace the operation of the phlebotomist, and in the sense that it can automate the right choice of the tube, the right tube, and the automated labeling of the tubes, and provide an aid in all the steps during the blood withdrawal, from the correct patient identification to the sample withdrawing to the finally to the sending of the samples to the lab. And so this has allowed us to deliver a complete solution for the end-to-end process, starting from the prescription to the results. And we can cover every step of the process with automation and traceability. Okay, the second section is about open data and the concept of open data platform. This morning we heard about the new challenges for healthcare. We heard it from the voice of Tomas, and we see how many new technologies, new players are coming, new business model. And but we heard also about the actual barriers to this, let me say, application disruption of the healthcare. And we already talked about these barriers, lack of interoperability between vendors, high cost, outdated interfaces, and more. But it seems that the open platform could be a solution, almost a solution from some of those problems, but for sure it will allow to address the problem of interoperability and more the problem of managing data in an open way. And this and basically is based on the use of two technological layers. The first one is the use of the use of a clinical data repository based on open data, which allows to hide the complexity of storing and then retrieving the data. And the other one is the use of the open APIs, which allows to retrieve those data and to run queries. And so on top of that, now new application developers can implement a new application just concentrating on the business logic of the application without caring about how to store data, how to manage data, but they just can concentrate on the business logic and the application itself. But speaking about the data and the possibility to retrieve the data, because everybody can understand how important it is to retrieve data, especially when we're talking about the quality of care. We started from the actual from the possibility today of retrieve the data, which is basically based on the possibility to query each system and to interconnect the different systems. And even if theoretically could be possible, in reality this is a very hard task. So we starting from the concept of open platform, we decided to change this model, and we started to work to a different model, centralized one model, which allows to copy, to retrieve and send a copy of the data in a central repository using an open data format. And the role of the patient in this model is crucial, because the patient is the enabler of all the process, authorization process. And of course, these processes should be automated, but the citizen has a key role in, as I said, in the authorization process and processes, and after in all the operation for sharing those data to other users. So we started to work on this concept, and then we developed the concept of virtual drawer, which is basically a central repository in the cloud, where we store the clinical data in an open format, and So we started to develop a lot of services, which basically allows, as I said, the user, the citizen, to authorize the process of feeding data into the repository, and then to share among other users, no matter if they are doctors or nurses or other simple citizens. One of our goals is, of course, to create a trusted platform, and in order to do so, we perfectly know that we have to take into consideration, great consideration, the problems of identity management, consent management, security, GDPR compliance, and so on, in every step of the process of feeding data from the clinical domain to the repository. And that's why we want to anonymize the data inside the clinical domain, then transform it in openEHR and send to the repository of the patient. Okay, the last part is how we put together the things. And we started on work on this concept almost 2 years ago with the TPM project. TPM stands for Total Patient Management, which is our effort on developing an open healthcare platform, which is by the combination of the use of automated and traced processes, plus an open data platform empowered by the user. So we started this project 2 years ago here in Sardinia, and we have signed an agreement with the local government to experiment this, the first prototype, the first demonstrator of this new software here in Sardinia in a real context with a real patient and real data. And of course, we started from the lab because it's the domain we know better. And now we are building this system based on a completely automated workflow, starting from the blood withdrawing, of course, the total automation of the sample preparation, and then the analysis. And once the data are in the LIS, we want to process them, transform them in openEHR, and fed them into the repository. And the last part is about creating application, sample application to assess the data. And in order to prove the goodness of our approach, we are supporting three use cases. The first one is a scientific use case, and we want to support the deep genotyping of thousands of citizens here in Sardinia, and then we want to support a clinical use case, and we want TPM to be the enabling platform to run artificial intelligence algorithms to basically to score and the insurgence of chronic kidney disease. And the last use case is about prostate cancer pathways, where we are going to provide a solution for making data available among the different practitioners or doctors and nurses who take care of the patient during this complex pathway. Looking at the roadmap, we see we scheduled our program into 3 phases. Now we are in phase 1. We are finalizing the development of the platform. And in phase 2, we want to enlarge the clinical specialties in order to cover almost everything. And in the last part of our program, we want to scale globally in order to create a global platform that will allow for new, multiple, and sustainable healthcare business models. So, summarizing, I show you how the outcomes of lab analysis depends on the quality of a process implemented, and I told you how automation and traceability are two enabling technologies to reduce the errors, and that's very important for the availability of clinical data and for the general overall quality of the outcomes of the clinical lab. Data, of course, is fundamental for the outcomes, and today's IT solution could be a could be a barrier to the so-called application disruption. But we think that the use of a platform, of an open platform based on the concept of open and vendor neutral data, combined with the adoption of an open process solution, could be a key asset. And lastly, I'll give you a very brief introduction of what is the Inpeco vision to provide a secure and scalable and reliable technological platform to deliver the next generation of healthcare services. And more or less, that's all. Thank you very much.
Do you have any question for Paolo?
Question?
Okay.
I'm looking in your eyes, guys. I'm looking in your eyes. Okay.
It's a very simple thing, but I think very powerful. One of your slides, you're showing you were effectively starting the process with the patient having the lab test.
Yeah.
What I hope somebody does before long is to trigger events onto some kind of bus, so that as a patient, I know where you've got to. You know, your data is available, because knowing what's happening for a patient, or indeed for a clinician when I've been on that side, is a real pain in the neck. And if we just said, you know, triggered, it's ready, it's done, it's back at the doctor, whatever. And just in some generic way, not as part of the app, then somebody else's app could pick that up and apply that to referrals, to care pathways. I think we've got something very powerful that would save people a lot of anxiety.
I think that this could be also done by creating a software on top of the traceability data. So what we are more focused at is provide solution to trace every step. So, and then you can build another system that take care of the traceability data and take actions.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, thank you, Paolo.
Thank you.
Now, we welcome Sara Luisa Mintrone of Dedalus. We are very happy of having her here, because it's the first time practically we met, and we are very interested in listening to the presentation of Dedalus' perspective about the use of openEHR. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you, Sara.
You're welcome. Thank you to you. Okay, seems to arrive. In the meanwhile, I started to introduce myself. I'm Sara Mintrone. I'm in the world of healthcare IT since 1986, unfortunately. And so I had the chance to live many different ages of healthcare IT. And even I had the chance to wear many different shoes on this world, because I moved at the beginning in the technical world as a programmer, system specialist, and then I moved more towards the customers, and then marketing and sales. So this is helping me a bit to interpret this new era. I'm here to make a kind of pre-announcement of something Dedalus Group is doing around the semantic approach to clinical data sharing. And our perspective is exactly in the clinical world, and started our thinking started exactly around the clinical collaboration matter. Today, clinical collaboration leaves a lot of difficulties, mainly around understanding patient information, applying best practices and clinical guidelines, and increasing and cope with an increasing pressure on risk management and clinical governance. So we can say that the clinical collaboration needs today are mainly around the need to reduce the risk of misinterpretation of clinical information, support a deeper involvement in clinical communities to improve a continuous training process on best practices and clinical guidelines, and support clinical research and trials, having really the possibility to share and compare data, which is today very, very, very difficult. So we can say that today we are in a world that have no common rules to ensure real data comprehension. But this morning we extensively talk about one of the most important initiatives that we are looking very closely, and you know better than me, so openEHR. That from our point of view has a very technical approach, a bit difficult to be understood or widely understood and widely adopted from the clinicians. And a community that is encountering, at least had encountered the problems in growth. Other initiatives, there's many, I'm not going to mention every, but CDISC is an important initiative in the pharma world. You can imagine how many attention the pharma world has in standardizing and understanding better with less effort the clinical information. MESH, probably the largest database of medical publication, that they did a good effort of classification, but without a logic of representing the data, or many other initiatives. All that is telling us that there is an increasing need of norming, except this word that perhaps for the English guy is not perfectly fitting, but I hope you can understand the meaning. We have new and old actors moving in the clinical domain. All the clinical guideline systems and clinical literature systems are having difficulties to work on this word of semantic approach and clinical concepts. We have an increasing number of clinical decision support systems, but they are not based on normalized code system. We have this big promise of artificial intelligence, but that today is having difficulties on working on not normalized data. Many coding systems that you know better than me, and an increasing number of not open semantic representation model. So we need to approach this word very, very complicated. In other words, in our opinion, these 20 years of EMR history were interpreted in a strange way, and someone already told this before than me. At the end, EMRs introduced uses, definitions, acronyms that at the end represent clinical risks, and in any case are really a barrier to support the clinical collaboration and the clinical data sharing. And we are aware, we think that in the short term, the clinical world and the community of clinicals will not converge in a single classification and standardization system. So this was our idea, and was at the base, is at the base of our approach, so this clinical knowledge portal. Our proposal that I'm trying the next few slides to at least highlight, which are the aims of the CKP: support real clinical collaboration, allow the exchange of clinical information between operators belonging to different organizations without modifying their ecosystem, share operating methods of managing clinical use cases, allow to link clinical concepts with all the possible classifications and clinical literature there are, and really enable the collaboration with all the possible technical interoperability solution. The approach. First of all, we are working in a very friendly, easy to use tool, dedicated, addressed exactly to clinical professionals. Our approach is use all existing classification and representation model or systems, not pretending to change anything in the current clinical practice, and do not impose any semantic or classification structure. And as industry, we must do even the fourth sentence. We can't limit ourselves just to the theory, to represent the knowledge, but we need to have something more operational, something that can be used into the clinical routine. The main idea turns around this concept of multi-directional cross-referencing. So I don't want to enter in detail, even if, because I'm not more a technical person, but the idea is to have this horizontal and vertical cross-referencing, and openEHR for us is a point of really a pillar of this referencing. I was saying vertical cross-referencing in order to be able to ensure cross-referentiality between different classification systems, horizontal cross-referencing to guarantee the cross-referencing between different information or representation system like openEHR is, and capability to manage this vertical and horizontal operation simultaneously. So giving this capacity to be cross-reference agnostic at the end without, as I said before, impose things. Three main definitions, just to be sure we understand each other: clinical concept, clinical information, and clinical use case. Clinical concept. Of course, we are starting from a representation on the concept and the mind map that you perfectly know. And if you accept my proposal, we can assume this representation level as the wooden part of a tree. On top of this, there are the leaves, and for our perspective, they can be all the possible classification systems that we we encounter in our activities. What is a clinical information? Is the couple between a clinical concept and the clinical value. So, assuming again this metaphor can be the fruit of these three. What are clinical use cases? For us, clinical use cases are defined across two dimensions, action and condition. Actions are actions, condition can be symptoms, diagnosis, or many other combination of these. And for each clinical use case, we are going to be able to define per each setting the data collection model and the data presentation model, and associate the rules, the clinical pathway that can be triggered on each of those clinical use cases. As I said before, not just theory, we really want to allow this sharing of clinical use case across infinite communities in order really to create eco-sharing systems. We are going to propose a kind of a voting criteria, a voting system, really to enable the different communities to evaluate and to give an opinion around the different clinical use cases that were provided from other communities. And instant usability. All this thing is provided through APIs, open and free. So any possible vendor can really cooperate and be part of this horizontal and vertical structure. When I said easy to use, this is just a print screen of the voting system, a very friendly, a very easy way to ask the collaboration of the clinical community. As I said before, this is the idea of Dedalus. This part of the project is going to be offered free of charge and with native open approach. We know that it's important to build communities, and you are testimonying this. We take this responsibility. We started already to aggregate relevant international partners. With our CEO, we are visiting companies, relevant companies all around the world, trying to create this kind of collaboration. And we are building clinical advisory board, multi-professional and multidisciplinary, to manage and to support the different level of communities we have in mind. But from the clinical knowledge portal, even the new set of solutions, the new strategy of the Dedalus group that is called the D4 will have some benefit. And from this part ahead, this is what we are going to do using the clinical knowledge portal. As we said, each clinical use case can be related to a clinical pathway that is executed from our workflow engine to generate operational tasks in the clinical collaboration solution. This means that each clinical use case is able to dynamically configure the operating environment, form for data collection, and viewer for data presentation, depending on the activities the device and the operator is doing in that moment. And the system is going to have the capability to manage the multi-clinical use case conditions. Just another example, this is the so-called patient synoptic, is a viewer that is dynamically configured by the solution thanks to the information that are being defined into the clinical knowledge portal. So if the community decided which kind of information are important to be reviewed, to be viewed the first time that a patient arriving with acute myocardial infarction in an emergency were there, the system can automatically prepare the screen with the information that the community decided were important to see in this condition and this action. Coming to the conclusions, thanks to the clinical knowledge portal, we think we will be part of this large community working from different perspectives in industry, from its own perspective, but on this world of clinical data sharing, really having the chance to ensure the real comprehension, and really we want to give the possibility to those communities to use in practical this effort to define, to share together what can be the data to collect or the data to be viewed. So real clinical collaboration can help to move from pains to reliever. I don't want to bother you. I think is quite clear from the very beginning of this morning. And to finish, we are aware that is a very big challenge. We are not so unconscious the difficulty of this job, but we think to have a chance to succeed. And why I leave to this 1 minute and 44 seconds to explain to you. If the sounds.
Among doctors, as well as between doctors and patients, as it's the only way to offer quality treatment and therapy. This is achievable if full data intelligibility is guaranteed, thanks to a universal clinical language. Dedalus, thanks to its 30 years experience in public and private healthcare, has managed to create a revolutionary strategy to evolve IT systems, D4. D4 allows IT systems to evolve in a progressive and faster manner while preserving previous investments. Moreover, it makes IT systems collaborative, favoring data exchange and accessibility. D4 is therefore decisive in creating new levels of medical collaboration. Personalized, efficient, effective, and safer. Today, Dedalus is the leader in European healthcare and one of the major players worldwide. Data testifying its success are numerous. Every day, 1 million professionals work with Dedalus' solutions. Its IT systems are present in 1,500 hospitals and help run 30,000 units and 3,000 laboratories. Every year, thanks to Dedalus, 3 billion clinical documents are issued. And 30 million ER admissions are guaranteed. Every day, 30,000 medical operations are performed, and around 1 million patients.
So, thank you for your patience and for the time you provide me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara. Are there any questions?
Probably many, but afternoon is tough.
Too many. Yes, yes, of course, of course. Thank you. Thank you again. Okay. Now it's the moment of welcoming John. John Reeds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just need to find them now. Where are they?
I think closing. Here it is.
Okay.
We'll talk about the use of openEHR in the 100,000 project in the UK.
I was looking for the little bit.
Yeah. I think you need some minutes to start.
Thank you, and apologies to colleagues who were here yesterday who have heard most of this already. So I'm John Reed. I've worked in the English NHS system for actually over 30 years ago. And I decided to jump ship 7 years ago thinking do something different, but I ended up being involved in this very exciting project for about 4.5 years now. So it's still not coming up. It's definitely something with my presentation, isn't it? It doesn't like me. It wasn't deliberate. Okay, so we've seen this. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the 100,000 Genomes project and some of the challenges we faced and why we chose openEHR to help us address some of those challenges, and how we went through some of the nitty-gritty around, probably not too much about the procurement, but some of the implementation considerations, where we are now and kind of what the next steps are. So first of all, the UK government launched the 100,000 Genomes project back in 2012, but it only really started kicking off in 2014. The idea was to recruit patients from across particularly the English NHS system. And England has a population of about 50 million people, so it seemed to be a unique opportunity to lever that public health system to full genome sequence 100,000 genomes from patients with rare diseases and with cancer. So to do that, they set up a company, the Department of Health set up a company called NHS England to really manage all the contracts and manage the data. And they asked the NHS hospitals, of which there's probably about 200 acute hospitals, to gather together into these new organisations called genomic medicine centres, and there were going to be 13 of these, usually centred around existing regional genomic laboratories. So I've been working in in North Thames, and we're responsible for about 25,000 of those genomes, so pretty much quarter of the project. So this is a bit of a map about just showing you how England's divided up and the genomic medicine centres fall out. You can probably see, whilst it looks quite small, North Thames Genomic Medicine Centre is pretty much North London and the surrounding area. So we probably have a catchment of about 6 or 7 million people, something like that. The GMC is made up of these leading hospitals, and some of you have probably heard of at least one or two of them. The Regional Genetics Laboratory is based in Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children, and that's where I've been based and working on this for the last 4.5 years. So, what were the challenges? So, Genomics England really didn't have any experience of existing data standards, and they didn't really understood how the NHS worked. But what they did know is the data they wanted to inform the diagnostic process for the genetic data that's been returned, and what they wanted for research, both to treat existing patients and to sell on to pharma for developing new treatments. So we had a big problem. There were 1,300 data points in a completely new proprietary standard, and we thought, what are we going to do with those? So in the first, detailed look at these, we estimated probably 50 to 70% of those data points were probably captured on existing hospital systems. It's a little bit strange because it is almost like they thought that every hospital had a full EPR and were paperless, yet we've not managed to do that. But we have got a few, probably what you call best-of-breed systems, but that really just means existing stuff we've got. So 50% to 70% of the data probably was being captured in existing systems. We didn't know what the quality was. We didn't know whether it's semantically interoperable. There were going to be some information governance issues. What data were we entitled to pull in for these patients? What are they given consent to? And we only wanted to obviously target those patients and not all the patients. So building a big database was going to be a bit of an issue, and sorting out the ETL. But I think the biggest thing for me after working in the NHS by that point over 20 years was I'd seen many projects and many initiatives come and go, millions of pounds being spent on IT, and at the end of the project it's just turned off and lost. It was just a crying shame, usually built around a big database, proprietary model, proprietary applications, and the reuse just didn't happen. And I was determined this time to sort of learn from some of that experience and not make the same mistakes again. So I'd already done some work in one of the trusts where I was an IT director before the Royal Marsden Cancer Hospital, which you may have heard of. And we experimented with the HL7 RIM back in the noughties, the 2000s, and we weren't able to implement it, but we kind of got the idea of what we really wanted to do. And subsequently, I found out a bit more about ISO 13606, and openEHR, and I thought, well, actually, that could be applicable to managing. Those could be applicable to managing the, especially the clinical and phenotypic data that we needed to capture for these patients. So we commissioned a report really that had a look around the world at various use cases at the time, see what had been done and whether this would be a feasible standard for us, whether it was affordable and how we might do it. And the conclusion was a positive yes. So why did we think that openEHR was the right way to go? Well, you all heard the presentations from this morning, so I probably don't need to repeat too much of this, but it was the key. One of the key things for me was it was vendor neutral. For some of our hospitals, though, they might have thought, well, that's going to be a bit awkward for us. It's going to be a bit threatening to our EPR strategy. So we developed some materials to explain how it complemented what they did with their existing mega suites, where they've got mega suites, and mega suites don't do everything, and there are always these hundreds of feral systems that we heard about earlier. And if you haven't got a mega suite, well, actually this could provide a platform for an EHR for you. We knew it worked in large deployments. We'd seen the example already from Moscow, so there wasn't going to be a problem from that time. We knew it worked with other standards, particularly ontologies like SNOMED and LOINC. So that was all very good, and we found out how to do that. So we thought, well, this is pretty low risk. Why wouldn't we do it? Why would we sit and build a proprietary solution from scratch to mirror what Genomics England wanted and then throw it away afterwards, providing we could come up with a solution that was the right cost? So what did we decide to do? So during this time we had scoured the NHS, and finally, once we were out of procurement to become a genomic medicine centre, because all those 13 GMCs were in competition with each other until the contract was awarded, so no one was talking to each other. But as soon as the contracts were awarded, we started talking to each other. What are you doing about the informatics? And a lot of them hadn't really got a clue, but we found one in particular in Birmingham that had developed a very nice application called Genie, and they had used it for 2 previous similar projects, Stratified Medicine and DDD, which were cancer and rare disease research projects respectively. And they were developing it to support 100,000 genomes. And this application manages the recruitment of the participants, the collection of sample data, the tracking of sample data, the entry of clinical data that wasn't already available in hospital systems, for example, human phenotype ontology. And it would they were going to engineer it to get it into the right format to send to Genomics England. So they seemed like a good organisation to work with, and we convinced them to build on the kind of the openEHR repository approach that we had envisaged, and we'd worked together on a solution that was both a combination of their, if you like, orchestration platform and our sort of openEHR CDR idea. So I'm not going to tell you much more about openEHR because you've heard that this morning, and for us it made much more sense. We weren't going to build an openEHR platform from scratch. We knew there were some open source initiatives going on, but they weren't quite ready, so that certainly wasn't for us. And we thought we could go to the market to buy this. And the other thing we would do is create a standard, if you like, kit bag of tools that we could give to the hospitals in our area to help them get their data into openEHR. Many of those hospitals already had integration platforms, and they were using HL7 2 something, probably for labs and radiology and that sort of thing, and we could lever those existing information flows to populate our system. So that was the kind of emergent strategy. This was a little bit for the NHS, but just to say we had 3 very good tender responses, so there's definitely capability in the market. Marand came way above the other 2 for our particular needs, and the contract was awarded to Marand in 2016. So, what were the challenges? Well, I told you about the 50 to 70% of data that we've already got in our systems, probably, but having a look at the GEL data set and how that aligned to openEHR, we kind of subcontracted that work to Ian and Hildy. And so I think Ian showed a slide earlier this morning, probably about 70% of the data points we wanted to manage were represented well in openEHR already, and 30% were going to need to be modelled out. Probably a third of those were small extensions to existing archetypes, which were great. Another third was some new stuff, particularly around rare disease, as Ian talked about. And probably the last third, well, it looks like Genomic England just didn't get that right, because it didn't fit with the real world, for example, family pedigrees. So we just left some of that stuff because it was just too difficult, and we concentrated on the sort of 80 to 90%. So the other important piece that we put in place was a metadata registry. So we thought it's absolutely critical that we could track where we'd got each of these data points from in all these 7 organisations that we were working with initially, how we would be transforming that to openEHR, and how we'd be transforming that to GEL, and how we'd track versions of that over time. So that was another piece we purchased and implemented, and that helped us then provide the mapping tables that we needed for the data extraction and transformation that we had to put in place for our existing legacy systems. So this slide shows a bit of a high-level architecture of the solution. On the left-hand side, we've got these, current 7 partners in North London. Most of them have already got their own integration environment, but we gave them some tools and we implemented an openEHR repository in each. We thought that was quite important sort of architectural decision, that we would go for a federated approach rather than a centralised approach, because again, centralised probably means it would be thrown away at the end of it, and we wanted reuse. We wanted to use this as an opportunity to, if you like, start selling the idea of open standards to each of the organisations and give them the opportunity to get their hands dirty. But also it helped us get round some of the information governance and GDPR issues, because if they put data in there that we weren't entitled to, then we weren't going to query that from there. So they could use it as a whole organisation data warehouse if they wanted to license it that way, and that didn't really affect what we were going to draw out through the Genie project for the patients we were managing. So the final step of the journey was then transforming the openEHR data to meet the requirements of Genomics England, and what we really hoped is Genomics England would see the work we were doing and maybe update their data set to be a bit more compliant with standards, but they sort of ran out of steam to do that, so we had some discussions, but unfortunately they fell a little bit on deaf ears. So that's kind of where we are today. We've got millions of lab investigations across these repositories, and radiology reports and cancer diagnoses in some of those standards we were looking at earlier, like TNM for the staging. We're augmenting that data through Genie to render the HPO terms, and we're just about in the process to push those back into openEHR. But I think the next really exciting piece is the next sort of stage of the journey. We're now getting the sequencing data back. So this is the variant information, and what our bioinformaticians have done in Birmingham and Great Ormond Street is they've built an application to help manage what we call genomic MDTs, or you might call molecular tumour boards, that sort of thing. So taking the sequencing data, presenting it to scientists to categorise, and then organising it into meetings for the clinicians to decide on the care for the patients. And the bioinformaticians have built a great open source tool that they'd used in the kind of the research project, which 100,000 Genomes was. But we thought, well, let's redo that. Let's use openEHR for mainstreaming. So this is actual clinical practice now. So we're just in the process of building this app at the bottom called Genesis to MDT. And I'm quite excited with working with some of you to get that data intimately into openEHR. So these are just some of the people that were involved more widely in our project, and it's probably not a complete list now, obviously. So some of our next steps. So as I said, we're collaborating with Birmingham. Birmingham is the centre of the West Midlands region, and they're in the process of rolling out the solution to their 18 trusts. So we'll soon have 25 trusts that have got some form of openEHR and integration that are using for genomics. And the probability is that the 4 trusts in West London, so Imperial, the Royal Marsden et al., are joining North London. So that sort of racks up the number a bit further. So did I say there was about 200 hospitals in the NHS. So we're getting to a reasonable percentage in terms of seeding the idea of open air, which I think is good, and that enables us to get some real use cases we can sort of play back to the wider NHS about the benefits of using open standards across the NHS. The next big phase is next month, July, we switch to mainstream in genomics. So this is whole genome sequencing for patients having routine care. So we're out of research mode now. Genomics England have built some new platforms. Unfortunately, they're not quite streamlined as we like. And it's going to be paper request forms, so a slight step back initially, but we'll be getting the data back through that API that I showed you on the previous slide, and we're going to be building that tool for managing the data. Really keen to look at via connectivity. That's the big sort of buzzword across the NHS, and that's all they're interested in hearing at the moment. So I think we need to show that we're playing in that game, and I think we can use it as a lever with Genomics England to at least comply with some standards. So I think we need to get stuck in there and inform that. So I think that's it for the minute, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any question, any comment from the audience?
If you look, so more or less, how many patients you have in database in the system?
So in North London, we've got just over 20,000, and in the West Midlands, it's probably more like 15,000. So about 35,000 between us.
Okay, and how deep is the record? I mean, how many sort of archetypes or any kind of information you have per person?
Well, some of
on average,
the
of course.
archetypes we're using more than others, and I'm probably not the best place, unfortunately. I've not got my hands dirty on the integration. What would you say, Ian? We're particularly doing radiology, pathology, cancer, some patient demographics.
25.
Yeah. And we.
Something like 20, 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's mostly labs.
Okay.
But there's others, some histopathology, some imaging.
So we did a bit more work on the labs than just put the existing data in. Most hospital lab systems were using locally defined test codes. Mm-hmm. So we kind of took the opportunity, I say took the opportunity like it was trivial, but we mapped all those to the LOINC standard as well as GEL's own standard, because we thought, well, it won't be future in GEL standard, but actually having it in LOINC could be very useful in terms of the whole normalization process, which means we can render some of those results together into a longitudinal record. We didn't have any guidelines how far back to go with those data points, so I think we chose to go back about 19 years. So we requested from each trust, pretty much, give us everything you've got, we'll curate it and we'll decide what to send to Genomics England, but let's at least get it into openEHR, and then we can...
So effectively you have a large data warehouse.
Sorry?
Effectively you have the record for about like 30,000 or 40,000
Yes,
people.
and if those patients had been at, say, a specialist centre in North London, perhaps in Great Ormond Street when they're a child, and then were treated for cancer at UCLH, we'll have both parts of those, because we queried all the repositories for all the patients. So it wasn't just the current snapshot in time, especially for red actually for cancer as well. We wanted to know what the history was. The diagnosis might have been long before they were sequenced. And for cancer, they may have had other cancers beforehand, so that was quite important.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Is that it? Am I let off now?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Gideon Giacomelli will present us. You go yourself, okay? Their experience with openEHR in the EUCANCan project. Thank you, Gideon.
So anyway, I start. I'm Gideon Giacomelli, and you might wonder what my surname is. I have to disappoint you. I'm actually German. First disappointment already, but my wife is Italian. And I'm a bioinformatician, but these days I'm kind of between cancer genomics research and professional software development. And in the EUCANCan is a research project. We had a kickoff meeting beginning of February this year. It's kind of planned for 4 years. And it's closely related to ICGC, which you might have heard about. ICGC is the International Cancer Genomic Consortium. We started, I think, very beginning of sequencing, like 2007 or something. And there are many cancer patients were sequenced, whole genome. And now this ICGC ARGO is maybe the next stage, where we want to bring this, where we want to speed up research even more using the data. So yeah, so here is a bit the vision of ARGO, of EUCANCan. We have this different city connecting Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris, Barcelona, Heidelberg, Bilbao, Toronto, and Montreal. Yeah, sadly without Italy, but sure we're finding ways to collaborate also in this project. And we want to basically accelerate science and share our sequence data in some way, at least on some level. And basically in the end improve healthcare. But I mean, healthcare is extremely difficult. We have seen this now also in several presentations. And genomic in the end is just one more data point measurement device where we can basically understand the patient even more and do precision medicine. And I think this is still very evolving, and we're trying to kind of get more into healthcare now. So what are the challenges we are facing to move from research into healthcare? And of course, obviously, it's standardization and interoperability, because you need to share your knowledge, because cancer is always rare, and you have to find this like across continents, and you want to share your knowledge and your information, and this is only possible with standardization and interoperability. And what we don't want to do, just another standard, another data model, another information specification, which then someone has to realize. So of course, we are looking at openEHR, we're looking at these other big consortia like Global Alliance for Genomic and Health. We're just looking around what is there to kind of agree on something. And of course, another big challenge is the legal and ethical challenge with genomics data. It's already complicated to share data inside of Germany, and this will be, we're working on this in HIMID. But across Europe, we have this GDPR, which in some degree helps. But across continents, it's tough. It's really tough. So what did ICGC do? They developed in the end kind of a portal, and there was a central hub where all the data got submitted to, including the raw data and the mutations. And this is basically all available over this ICGC portal. The sequence data is kind of closed, with kind of closed access, but somatic mutations are really public. You don't even have to log in for that. And we're trying to do something similar, but it's getting harder and harder, I would say. So, to show you a bit kind of the concept, of course, there are sequencing centers across the world in all these kind of bigger cities. And they all have somehow bioinformatics pipelines, and there we also want to standardize it, but this I'm not talking about. But in the end, the variant calls, probably mostly somatic mutations, and some other molecular data will get submitted. And even the, let's say, United States and Canada is even more working already directly with these cloud services. And in Germany, it's a bit tougher, but we also potentially move into this direction. And then in the end, basically, of all this kind of submitted data will be another ICGC ARGO portal where you can access this data and kind of exploratively look at and find maybe similar patients and kind of just dig through the data. So the idea is basically in EUCANCan, we do this for all the nodes, for all the cities in a similar way. And as I said, it's just new, so we're kind of designing the architecture, how you want to do it, and these are two possible approaches, where you have some kind of metadata and raw data servers locally, and then a central federated portal, or this architecture too, where basically every site runs its own portal, and then you can log in and use like GA4GH develop some beacon. And here potentially we will also use FHIR or openEHR. And we plan to actually kind of present openEHR at the GA4GH planetary meeting in October, where we can maybe introduce to science more the idea of openEHR, which I kind of like much. And we work together now and design some genomic archetype, which will be presented later. And I think there's a lot of potential. I really like the idea and really like the community, and it's a good time so far, I must say. Okay, but to talk a bit more about where science is and where clinical healthcare is, just to have an idea, science is not really on this map. It's kind of creation of new knowledge. It's maybe somewhere down here. It's out of competition. That's why we get paid by tax money mostly. And if you want to make a new project, you're somewhere here, right? You kind of say, they have a cool idea. Maybe we can realize this. Maybe we can bring this to the market. And then it's a tough way, basically up to the service and to utility, where, clinical healthcare is highly regulated market. It's really complicated to get in there. You have to fill a lot of regulations. There are laws you have to kind of make sure that they are fulfilled in your software and your product. And there is a basically far way between research and clinical care. So let's see if we can anyway maybe speak a similar language that, it gets easier. And this is of course semantics. So as I said, this is kind of what we want to do. Research wants to find new biomarkers, wants to find maybe risks in your genome where you say, okay, now this drug is not good for you, this drug might actually help, so I want to help you to make better decisions. And so as I said, what language is science talking? What kind of semantics are they using? And so far, we looked at, it's kind of, ICGC did something because there was nothing there, and they want to carry this on because this is kind of, they say we need this metadata to do science better. So they kind of ask a bit, maybe the clinicians, if you do these projects, if you have like scientific projects where you sequence patients, please also provide this data. MCode is an American project where they have defined a data set, and of course GA4GH has kind of these knowledge streams, and many working groups where they try to specify more like, how actually do we model from like a sample to a patient to the molecular data, basically the whole package. And I mean, openEHR and FHIR I will not talk so much about because you heard already a lot today. So ICGC ARGO, this is ICGC, and this is also public. They made a kind of dictionary view, and you can see here, so that's the donor, and the specimen, this is the sample, and then there are like different sequencing types. And they basically invented their own language in some degrees. ICGC ARGO on some degree builds on that, and here's just some kind of set. From the clinical metadata, they look at the patient and at the sample, because it's important to know, okay, this is the cancer tissue, and this is the control tissue, like the blood. And this is kind of a wish list, and they look at ontology if it exists, but in the end, science doesn't care so much. This is just they're very practical. This is what I need now to do my science project, so please provide it to me somehow. Here, we can see basically this MCode concept where they look a bit at FHIR incomparable, and here down here you can also see genetic variants, genetic mutation tests. And also this is quite new. You can see it's version C09. It's not really kind of working, let's say. And then GA4GH. They have these kind of two bigger things. This is phenopackets, where they really, again, they define what kind of metadata they want for patient and sample. And basically they're working for cancer and rare diseases because these are two big research topics. And also this is public available, and you can look, basically there are examples of how they named basically these fields and what they would like to have for their research. And then again, if you talk about variant annotation, if you talk about variants, it becomes more complex, right? Because there are many different types. There are single nucleotide polymorphism, there are deletions, insertions, there are translocations, and even more complex mutational events, which are really hard to kind of break down to detail and structure them. And basically the variantation model is kind of trying that, to describe a variant on a very detailed level, to also put the evidence and provenance metadata. And here the idea is that this data model is later used for like publications, for like actionable mutations, where you say, okay, so if this mutation is found in a patient, and this is really the same mutation, because it's not so easy to know that it's actually really the same mutation in the gene, then we can maybe make this decision. And there are these trial approaches, which I didn't actually mention yet. So GA4H has many trial approaches, which are all research projects, which EUCANCan is one part of. And this CleanGAN and VIC and England and the Monarch are also trial projects, and these are kind of these knowledge databases which end up like publicly, and you can then basically use them to annotate your genome of a patient. So I would suggest you can also join this. It's really open, and here they are kind of have a bit more the research perspective, but you can, I think also industry can pick up information which potentially you want to use, and in your solutions you will have in the end. So yesterday ended with like my talk with many questions, and I just left 2 up there. So can we actually like standardize clinical care and genomic research, or is research even made for standardization? Maybe it's in some degree not possible. And in the end, of course, if we talk about like semantic, speaking the same language, in the end we have to talk also about technology, which enables speaking these languages between the worlds. Yeah, and honestly, I don't know. I don't know where it's exactly going, and there are many different approaches going on. So I will just leave you with 3 kind of quotes, which maybe makes you think, and maybe not, but it's okay. I mean, science is exploring the unknown, and clinical care is curing the patients right now because he has a problem. So 2 different worlds meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. Are there any questions for Gideon, comments? Yes?
In EUCANCan, what's the number of genomes you would expect, I mean, the number of patient number of genomes you expect to be dealing with?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, it's not so clear, because ICGC originally was where many countries joined, and they bought basically their own money and sequenced whole genome patient, then submitted it to this kind of consortia. And ICGC is also a consortia where basically research project can join. So if you have a whole genome sequencing research project, you can easily join ICGC and say, okay, you want to work together, you want to submit some data to your portal. And in this way, I think there is no precise number. They are open. You can just join any genome project can join. They're talking all about panels, they're talking about exome data. Anyone is welcome to basically join this consortia. And there was a workshop last year, and next year actually the workshop of ICGC ARGO will be in Korea. So if you want to come to Korea, it's a great opportunity. You can maybe convince your employer to let you travel to Korea.
Other questions? It's fine. Thank you, Gideon. Now is the turn of Antti Wolf. She will speak. She will talk to us about the IDMED project in Germany. I arrive. Okay, close. Eccoci. You are this year's okay. Great. And there we go. Thank you, Antti.
Okay, we have to wait for the picture. Where is it? So it's not working again? Okay, so now. Hello and welcome. My name is Antje Wolf. I'm from the Hannover Medical School from Germany. And I'm very happy to be able to present to you the HIMATE project, an open platform approach to enhance care and research across institutional boundaries. HIMATE is one of 4 nationwide data infrastructure projects funded within the German Medical Informatics Initiative by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. And it involves various medical universities from Germany and strives for facilitating the secondary use of data. Because the data which is produced inside the healthcare system indeed may provide valuable insights for both care and research, but currently it is not efficiently used. By not only funding our project, but also other consortia in Germany, the whole initiative wants to foster the data-driven medicine and wants to lay the foundation to establish a learning health system. The main goals of HIMATE are the establishment of an interoperable and open health data platform. In every participating institution, a so-called medical data integration center will be set up. And this medical data integration center will integrate data from primary source systems into their center, which is all based on the same generic and scalable architecture from the HIMATE platform. In the long term, we of course want to enable cross-institutional data access, data sharing, and analytics to be able to improve patient care and clinical research. Some facts about that. HIMATE covers around about a quarter of all German university hospitals, and the project started last year in January, is funded with about 40 million euros, and it goes until the end of 2021. As I said in the beginning, we are competing with other projects, and there are 3 of them. So the feasibility of this open health data platform will be demonstrated by 3 clinical-driven use cases from different fields. The first use case is from oncology. In oncology, it is all about bringing together omics data from genome sequencing and clinical data, structured and unstructured, and radiology data to build a so-called cross-organizational molecular tumor board. In the cardiology use case, it is about integrating data from wearable devices from the patient to better predict heart failure and to better follow up the patients with heart failure. In the last use case, it is from infection control. It is about designing a smart infection control system which is able to early warn and early detect on pathogen clusters and outbreaks in hospitals. So this sounds all very nice, and how hard can it be? We learned something about the challenges today, and we also have some challenges. And the German healthcare landscape currently looks something like this, and I think it's nearly the same in other countries. We have general practitioners, we have hospitals, we have laboratory systems, and we also have pharmacies, and of course, recently we also have some patient-reported outcomes from wearable devices and more. So in this setting, we will concentrate on the hospital setting. And the problem is this. This is the logical model of all systems of the architecture of the Hannover Medical School. So you can see a lot of application systems, and in the middle there's one big system. This is a communication server, and some systems are connected to this server, but some are not connected. When looking closer to a specific field, for example the intensive care unit, we can find specific application systems for the intensive care unit. At the moment, at the Hannover Medical School, we have 3 systems and 1 to 2 systems which are legacy products. The current systems looks like this. This is a patient data management system. We have a timeline with vital signs, and we also have some laboratory values, and of course some patient data. And I think this is a normal interface of one application. And the interesting thing is what lays behind that, and this is this. This is the database structure of this patient data management system, and it's not the full picture, as you can see at the bottom or at the top. So this is a vendor-dependent application with a vendor-dependent database. So in order to access data from this application system, you have to know the structure of this. And at the Hannover Medical School, this is the case for every application, or nearly every application I showed to you at the previous slide. And this is not only the case in the Hannover Medical School, this is also the case in other hospitals and university hospitals. So I think this looks really weird, but we are not finished yet. We can have a look at the tables, and you can see here on the side, these are all possible variables and candidates for variables which are defined in different tables of this database, which are connected to the concept of blood pressure. So you can see something like blood pressure 1 diastolic, blood pressure 2 diastolic, blood pressure 3 diastolic, and so on. And this is not the full picture. I think we have more of them. Of course, also other concepts are defined in tables. For example, the data types are defined in a single table, and other clinical concepts. So, of course, this is all vendor dependent. As Ian showed to us at the beginning in his slides, he was talking about the AQL, the archetype query language, and he said it's very good that you don't have to know the database when you want to access data by AQL. And I think this becomes really clear when we look at our queries, which we need to formulate when we want to access one data point. As you can see here, we have to join about on, I don't know, 10 or 15 tables in order to get one value, for example, for blood pressure. And even then, we can't really be sure whether this is the right blood pressure, because we are not sure whether we really have taken the right candidate of these variables. Okay. Now, when we think about secondary use of data, we have to be aware that this blood pressure concept, for example, is not only aware at the intensive care unit, but also at other sites in the hospital. So the blood pressure is not only measured at the intensive care unit, but also in other settings. So there will be more of these application systems documenting blood pressure values with more of these variables and so on. Furthermore, this picture only shows the application systems which are managed by our central IT department. Of course, we know that there are a lot of more databases, and for example, Excel tables or any patient data which are arrived from any trials, which are not centrally managed by our department, but by own specific departments. And we think at the Hannover Medical School, these are about 120 databases we don't really know about. So, of course, this is a problem. And in HIMATE, as I said in the beginning, it's not about sharing data in our setting, but with more than 1 or 2 hospitals. And this is why the picture looks like this. So every hospital has these problems and these challenges. And now we want to exchange data between these hospitals, and of course it's difficult. Just a quick note on on this thing, because we experienced it currently or a time ago. When we want to access data from our legacy product, from our intensive care unit, we had to buy another license, or we are in need of another license from the vendor to be able to access the data in a read-only fashion. And otherwise, the data is locked in by the vendor. And as you can see here, this even is a business strategy and a business model of such vendors. What do we learn? We learn that the actual and the current hospital information system architectures really do not fulfill the requirements we are in need of to achieve the goals of our medical informatic initiatives. So, where do we go from here now? So what's our idea? In HiMate, we want to join forces to create an open, scalable, and fair platform architecture to combine data from care research and external sources, and, now comes the point, to develop interoperable applications. So it's not only about bringing data together into one platform, it's also about designing systems which are interoperable because they are built on this platform. And every data which get entered into such system immediately is available to all other participants who are based on this platform. And instead of addressing only these 3 use cases, we wanted to have a generic scalable architecture, and therefore we defined our core principles. And these are open service models. All specifications are openly of the API are openly accessible to everybody. Open system specifications so that it's feasible for commercial and non-commercial use, and open information models so that all clinical models are well defined based on established and open standards. Especially for the last point, we wanted to focus on semantic traceability, on semantic interoperability, and on clinically led data modeling. And that's why we decided to adopt the openEHR approach of modeling for HiMate. I think we learned a lot about openEHR at this day. So for us, it was very important that we have the separation of technical and domain content. I think it's clear now after I showed to you these very complicated databases. And the modeling of archetype and templates to reach semantically enriched, interoperable, and harmonized data representation across all institutions which are participating in our project. And of course, all institutions have to agree on the models we define, and that's why we are in need of some managing framework, and this is our clinical knowledge governance framework. We defined roles and responsibilities, modeling tasks, and also workflows and IT support at the beginning of the project. The goal was to get optimized and structured modeling processes across all institutions. And of course, this clinic knowledge governance framework consists of different aspects. A lot of them are very similar to those Heather showed to us in the beginning. So we have first of all, we of course recruited modelers, and in our HiMate project we have at the moment 20 to 30 modelers who are working full-time on our clinical models, on archetypes and templates. And we also have some clinicians, of course, because they are very important. So we defined, for example, different modelers who are leaders for different use cases, but also for different institutions or for the whole project. And then we have some general workflows, what to do when we wanted to model any concept, and of course, very detailed workflows, how to create a new archetype, how to conduct reviews, and how to publish archetype, and how to bring it back to the international community. Therefore, we are using the openEHR Clinical Knowledge Manager, but also our own HiMate Clinical Knowledge Manager, which is accessible by everyone via this link. So it is open and everyone can see our archetypes and can work with it. And yeah. For us, it was very important to have the international collaboration and communication, and that's why we always think about bringing back our archetypes to the international CKM. Of course, we not only defined this concept after 1 year, we also wanted to know how good it works, and that's why we decided to do some statistics about that. And we have a publication for that, so everyone who is interested in this, please feel free to write me and I will send you the information. For example, because it fits very well to what Heather told to us, we tried to find out how many archetypes we are in use of can be reused from the international CKM. And after 1 year, we identified that 80% of all archetypes we are in need of in these 3 use cases can be reused. And only 20% have to be modeled on our own. Also, our CKM users are steadily increasing, which is very nice. We have 74 users at the moment. These are the numbers from April. And we also have very good participation of domain experts, so clinicians. And we are very happy about the current state, and we are looking forward to the next 2 years. And yeah, everyone who is interested in this, we have some booklet which is at the registration desk, so you can just grab one and take it with you. Otherwise, just contact me, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Antti. Any questions for Antti? Comments about? Okay, I've got a question. If you are planning in your work to integrate these hospitals to use some of the IHE profiles, and which one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is another aspect of our HIMED platform. So it's, of course, the HIMED platform is much more complicated as only the openEHR thing. So we have a lot more, and especially the IHE is one other aspect, and we're using different profiles from that. And I think the technical architecture can tell you more about that.
Okay, okay, sorry.
Yeah. And
okay.
we also, for example, have some FHIR. We are planning to adopt a FHIR server and a FHIR terminology server to enhance our models with also some FHIR resources.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well. We are arrived at the last talks of today. Of course, I cannot be impartial because I'm introducing my colleague Cecilia Magia. We are very proud of the work done by Cecilia and Paolo and all the people involved together with the editors and the IMED friends in the development of the archetypes for genomics. And now Cecilia will talk about it. Okay. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Francesca. Okay, so hi everybody. As Francesca said, I'm here to tell you something about our experience in using of openEHR, especially focused on the representing of genomic data, which involves us for the last 2 years mainly. So first of all, why do we care? Which are the motivations? The genomic data is something that is becoming more and more part of the healthcare process, and we expect that this trend continue to rise, especially because the fact that sequencing technology has become rapid, easy, and also thanks to the decreasing costs. And among the main application, just to tell one, precision medicine, which is based on the fact that the knowledge of the genomic profile of an individual may lead to have a better treatment, discover diseases also in earlier. From our point of view, why do we care about genomic data? This is because we have an in-house, we have a facility for next generation sequencing. In particular, it is one of the biggest in Italy. With 1,000 of sample sequenced up to now. These machines are integrated also with a data analysis platform, and we are part of a regional strategy for precision medicine. We started about 10 years ago, and the main applications regards the discovery of variations for rare diseases, and also transcriptomic with mainly regional and also national applications. So why the point is that we have all of this data, but and we know that they are a big asset, and but the point is that in order to extract this value from this data, we need to properly manage them, and the way in which we treat such data depends and is affected mainly from the inner complexity of genomic data. These data are complex to because not only because of their size, because we can have up to hundreds of gigabytes, but also because there is an inner complexity inside them, because if we think if we sample a sequence, if we sequence a DNA sample, we can find many variants which can affect many genes, more than one genes, and also it is reflected in the transcript, etc. So they have an irregular degree of nesting which we should maintain. And also there is another point which is which depends on the fact that unlike sample measurement, so other data that you can collect from a patient, genomic data are the result of a process where each of the steps of this chain had another degree of complexity on the top. So we have also many heterogeneous formats which are involved in this pipeline, and we must maintain this contextual information. Also, another point here is that each of these steps depends on external resources, for example, biological databases, and also the tools that we are using. And we must track all this contextual information in order to add this knowledge to the data. So we need a proper way, a proper format to preserve all this information. And we start think that openEHR may be the right solution, or at least a strategy, because it allows us to capture data semantics, to preserve the structure, so the granularity of data. It allows us also to refer to external terminologies and external resources. And also there is the mechanism of templates, which allows to adapt the content to the final user that will receive the results. And also the query language, which allows to make efficient query on them. So we start, we have a look around to see if there was something that we can reuse, and we discovered that there wasn't usable models. And so we need to understand better such data, study them, and then try to start from the level we try to break data, starting from the top to the smallest nodes, and then we try to reaggregate all this information to build the models. This is our starting point, which is one of the typical format used to represent the result of a sequence test to find variants. Each of the rows represent a variations founded. There are also some specificity in the column on the right side for samples. So These are main differences. And we try here with the red boxes to categorize this data and try to build, to aggregate some content for the next process of modeling. So this is the very first model. It consists mainly in two big archetypes, which are the genetic findings and the sequence variation, which separates objective data from annotations, so what has been calculated upon the data, the raw data. It is not also it was not explained here, but basically we have these two archetypes, some other archetypes for simple variations, and one archetype describing the reference sequence. These models has been published, and then it is when we met the openEHR community. And in 2017, we met openEHR editors, Siri and Heather, that starts to guide us in this process, which is still ongoing, actually. Then we know also, we become aware that also IMED consortium was interested in such work, and then we try to collaborate, and then our group grows, and we start a process where we make many iterations to try to reorganize the model, to add content that was missing, and finally we arrive in a point in which last 2 months ago it has been published again in the Clinical Knowledge Manager, this new version, and we start also in the process of review, and many people start to participate, and this is just to say that this is we need to be to try to make together people from different background in order to build better models. This is where we are now. So, as I said, we are currently reviewing this archetype for genetic variant. So from the 2 original archetypes, we build just one model, and we refine the context, we define better the semantic of the nodes, and we add missing parts, especially for some specificity that comes from the oncological use case. We add terminology bindings, and 2 more archetypes has been developed for describing complex variations. And that's it. This is the status, and this is basically what we would like to do now. Of course, we would like to continue this collaboration and go ahead with the reviewing of the models. We know that there are something that is still missing, and we would like to expand the models in order to embrace also this part. We have to define some templates for use cases, and in particular, we are currently working on an application for rare diseases. It is a prototype, but we are start to thinking about how we could start finally to use these models, and that's it. Just a small advertisement. If you would like to participate in this process review, you can adopt the archetypes from the Clinical Knowledge Manager. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Cecilia. Questions, comments? A lot of questions. That's it? Okay. So I think we are almost perfectly in time. I've just to say a few words. First of all, to thank everybody who helped to organize this day, starting from those who supported, like Sardegna Ricerche, Better by Marand, Dedalus, and Inpeco. And then I really like to thank the speakers who came here from a very different part of the world. Heather, Ian, John, Seely, and all the German group, or the HiMed and EUCANCan, Jürgen, and all the people that came here to share their experience in this field, also helping to create to enlarge the community around this kind of subject. And just to finish, I'd like to thank all my colleagues that helped to realize this event, in particular Katia, Cecilia, Emanuela, the technical staff in the auditorium who hosted us, even if there were some problems with the bandwidth from the remote connection. And anyway, thank you everybody, and above all, thank you here for resisting so long and being still here awake. Thank you. Bye-bye. Sorry, just one thing. We recorded all the video, all the talks of today, so we will make them available on our website and on openEHR website. And we will collect all the material to the presentation, and we will find a way to share directly emailing you with the email you left for the registration at to the event. That's it. Thank you.